All right, guys, I am back with a brand new DC update. And after I posted my video yesterday on Twitter, some people got on there to try to argue with me on numbers and people going to the theaters. And there's a group of people out there that will, to their dying breath, say that everything was terrible under Zack Snyder when he was at DC, and that he caused the whole downfall of DC. Yet he hasn't been there for many years, and everything during his time there was wildly successful, and everything since he left has tanked. And it's really crazy for them to say that the audience was lost on his stuff when they continue to come all the way through Aquaman. There can be no argument that he actually caused the downfall of DC. It's just not what happened. It was the studio. And that is a fact. And I'm going to show you guys something today that is interesting, because these people will go off on tangents on Twitter and then start talking about things that aren't even relevant to the topic that we're discussing. And one of the things I wanted to point out was that I don't think Superman Legacy is going to be that popular. And I'm going to base this, I'll talk about this at the end, and I'm going to show you something that's interesting. I'll talk about what I base it off of and what the reality is. And I just don't see that movie doing very well. But let's take a look at some of the photos that I have grabbed before I talk about that subject specifically here. So first up, James Gunn clarifies that Joker Folie à Deux will be a standalone film, not part of the DC Elseworlds branding, which tells me he's probably going to end it with that film, that they just have plans on that's all there's going to be. There will not be a third film. They're not even going to brand it Elseworlds, which means he wants it nothing to do with anything that came before as part of his DC. And it'll be interesting to see when we have Constantine 2 come out, if he's going to put that as an Elseworlds story or not. It's interesting to see what he chooses and chooses not to include in his universe. Here is another cool shot of Batman that somebody had done using AI. These AI tools are putting out some pretty amazing photos, and I'll continue to share the ones that I think are cool as they pop up on my feed. Now, this is something I didn't know, and I just included this in my TV show and movie update, but it says Tim Burton's unmade Catwoman was an $18 million black and white movie, says Batman Returns writer. Selena Kyle was living a low-key life in a small town. That would have been interesting to see. It definitely would have done better than the Halle Berry movie that they ended up coming out with instead. That just didn't make sense at the time, and Michelle Pfeiffer was really popular, and so was Batman Returns. They should have done this instead. Now, here's something that popped across my feed. It says Clint Eastwood talked his son Scott out of Suicide Squad sequels. Scott Eastwood reveals why he skipped the Suicide Squad, following sage advice from his father and industry legend Clint Eastwood. So, a lot of people can see the writing on the wall. Now, there was one sad passing just the other day. Tom Wilkinson, who was in Batman Begins as Carmine, he passed away rather suddenly the other day at the age of 74. So he will be missed. Now, this goes to show you how slow the news is out there, where an actual movie news outlet will post something like this. It says, little is known about the upcoming The Batman Part 2, but this fan poster imagines Gotham City and Batman covered in a layer of snow. Why are they sharing this? So now they're sharing fan art on this very well-known movie news website. I just think that's kind of weird. And first of all, he is not as big as that Batman in that photo right there. All right, so let's talk about this discussion I got into on Twitter yesterday. And it actually trailed into today, and then I just had to go away because they started to go off into a tangent onto other things that had nothing to do with what we were discussing. But I've brought this up before. Everyone said that Man of Steel was so divisive that people didn't want to go see any further DC films, and that Batman vs. Superman, which came out in 2016, sealed the deal. People turned away from Zack Snyder and wanted nothing to do with the DC universe. Yet, Suicide Squad did very similar to Batman vs. Superman. Wonder Woman did. Justice League took a dive because it got butchered, but they continue to come through Aquaman, which was the top performing film for them. And then all of a sudden it took a dive when everything thereafter turned into like a comedy and started to come back with Black Adam, which was not a comedy and was actually the best out of the films that came out since Aquaman. You can't blame that stuff on Zack Snyder. As soon as he left, he was an executive producer on Aquaman. It may have been on Shazam for all I know. He was gone. He wasn't there. He hasn't been there since 2018. I actually left in 2017. So he's been gone for the last 6 years, yet he's the one that caused all of this downfall? When everybody kept coming for the films? Even after Batman vs. Superman, which was supposedly the catapult that ruined everything? This is just not the case. And I really wish this graph had the movies that actually came out recently, because it's even worse for those films. But what I decided to do was I decided to pop up what, with inflation rates, would these movies have done at the box office if released today? Because, this person started to go off on a completely different subject and said that the Batman was critically acclaimed and did really well for the studio. It had a budget of $200 million, but grossed $771 million. Which is, yes, that's good, and yes, that means it's well, but nowhere near as many people went to see this movie as they have done past films, and that's what that chart is going to look at. And by someone talking about that, my YouTube channel is profitable. It doesn't cost me anything to make these videos except my time, and yet I profit off of YouTube and the advertising. So that's an incredible return for my time, right? Doesn't cost me anything, but I'm making ad revenue. So I'm wildly successful according to them. But let's take a look at this chart. So if, Batman vs. Superman had come out today, under today's, inflation rates, it would have made over almost $1.02 billion. Wonder Woman would have made $943 million. Suicide Squad would have made $873 million. And Man of Steel would have made $806 million. All better than the Batman. These are facts, people. You cannot deny this. It is a fact that more people were going to theaters during the time that Zack Snyder was there than when he left. It is a fact. You cannot deny that. He was not the downfall. He was the one holding everything together, and then everything took a dump thereafter. And I'm going to point out something here about the Batman. Batman is the number one property from Warner Brothers when it comes to the DC Universe. Batman is wildly successful, sells a ton of comic books. Superman does not sell nearly as much as Batman does. And you really think Superman Legacy is going to make all kinds of money, especially when I know they're going to pump in so much money in advertising. They're going to have to. They want to get the word out about that movie. And you really think that that's going to make even as much as the Batman does? And I don't care what the budget is. The smaller the budget, the cheaper it's going to look. And you're going to have some generic superhero film out there again, just like everything else that's been released. So for people to believe that Superman Legacy is going to be the savior of the DC Universe, I think are living in fantasy land. I hope it's an incredible film, and I will admit it if it is, but I don't expect it to be. I see this being nothing other than a disaster going forward for Warner Brothers. Guys, those numbers are completely, they're just mind-blowing when you look at that. There were more people going to the theaters for those films, and it took not a small dive, it took a massive nosedive as soon as Aquaman got done, and it's been just going lower ever since. And to think that James Gunn is going to be able to come in and save them, it's just not going to happen, guys. It's not going to happen, and he has his hands in every project when this universe starts. We're going to see what happens. I will be covering the news going forward. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and you will be notified as I have new videos go up. I do appreciate all of the support.